Imagine that you're being chased by a gang of armed bad guys. There's not a single tree or stone wall to duck behind for cover. And unlike in a Hollywood film, nobody's going to swoop in and rescue you. So, the villains have you cornered at the edge of a riverbank, leaving you with no escape routes on land. Your only option is to jump into the river. So now the question is, will it be safer for you to get under the water, with the H2O slowing down and perhaps stopping the bullets from reaching you? Or will your enemy's ammunition tear you apart and, like Moses with the Pharaoh, turn the water red? To answer this question, we need to turn to physics. The fact is that any substance will create some resistance for an object moving through it. That's why a bullet flying through the air starts to behave quite differently once it encounters a liquid. More specifically, water requires more force to travel through than air. And as the power of a bullet cannot be increased once it leaves the barrel of a gun, the maximum that this deadly hunk of metal is able to achieve is to get through a couple of meters of water before it slows down and stops. You might remember how, in the first few minutes of the remarkable film Saving Private Ryan, defenseless infantrymen jump from their Higgins boats and into the water to try and escape the relentless German machine gun fire. But somehow many of them still get shot even underwater. This is a wonderfully dramatic scene, but is it entirely realistic? Or is it an example of Hollywood maybe bending the rules of physics a bit for dramatic effect? The Nazis in that scene were firing from MG-42 machine guns. This is an incredibly powerful weapon. A bullet fired from such a weapon has an initial speed of about 2,400 feet or 740 meters per second. But yes, after encountering water, its energy will dissipate in mere microseconds, stopping it after just a couple of feet. So either the American soldiers in that film were exceedingly unlucky, or Spielberg might have stretched the truth just a tiny little bit. However, that doesn't mean that this wonderful liquid is going to save you from an entire army. The level of resistant effect upon a projectile is going to depend on a variety of factors, such as the gun's caliber, the material the bullet is made from, its initial velocity, the amount of time it spends in the liquid, and much more. Without delving too deeply into complex mathematical calculations, let's just say that the resistance is directly proportional to the speed of the projectile. Interestingly and paradoxically, the faster a bullet flies, the slower it will swim through the water. Thus, for example, a bullet shot from a pistol that zips through the air at a speed of 1,640 feet or 500 meters per second under normal conditions won't be much faster than a snail once it enters the water. And a rifle bullet traveling at 3,280 feet or 1 kilometer per second will look like something moving in ultra-slow motion once it enters the H2O. And let's not forget about liquid density. With the bad guys hot on your tail, if you have a choice between jumping into a river or into a tank of Aunt Jemima's real maple syrup, do not hesitate to choose the latter. In order to figure out which weapons are most capable of killing a person underwater, specialists in the field of ballistics carried out an experiment. A special ballistic gelatin, which replicated the characteristics of human flesh, was placed at the bottom of a pool. Then various projectile propelling devices with different calibers and various degrees of power were fired at this gelatin from close range and at an angle of about 30 degrees to more accurately reproduce real-world conditions. The first test firearm was a copy of a powder gun from the American Civil War era, the projectile from which reached a speed of approximately 980 feet or 300 meters per second. Upon entering the water, it immediately went off trajectory and didn't even come close to hitting the target. Modern weapons didn't do that well either. A 9mm pistol and a rifle did manage to hit the target, but only when the target was at a depth of just 1 meter and was almost directly under the shooter's feet. A similar performance was achieved using a pump-action rifle, a type of weapon which is mostly used for hunting. The shot from this gun achieved fatal results only at a distance of 50 inches or about 1.25 meters, which is surprising given the bullet's initial velocity of 1,400 feet or 425 meters per second. After a series of unsuccessful attempts, the experimenters decided to up the ante and used a .223 caliber rifle. A .223 caliber rifle fires ammunition at supersonic speeds, roughly 2,500 feet or 760 meters per second. But even this couldn't produce a technical kill shot, even at the shortest distances, as the resistance of the water instantly broke the bullet into tiny fragments. Next up was the good old M1 Garand, or Garand as some people call it, a .30 caliber semi-automatic rifle that was a mainstay and potent symbol of World War II. With an initial bullet speed of about 2,800 feet or 850 meters per second, this warhorse also failed pretty miserably and didn't cause any serious damage even when fired at point-blank range. The last weapon in this series of tests was the pants-pooping and fear-inducing .50 caliber rifle. Alas, it too also turned out to be completely useless when firing into water. So much so that one would be completely safe after just diving half a meter below the surface. This was due to the rifle's bullets shredding into pieces right after hitting the water. But what would happen, you might ask, if your evil bad guy pursuers jump into the water after you and tried to shoot you from under the water? A Norwegian physicist by the name of Andreas Wahl decided to test this scenario, risking his life to conduct an experiment in a pool of water. This brave and plucky researcher filled a pool with the wet stuff, where he then placed a SIG SG-550 assault rifle aimed at himself. He fired the weapon by pulling the trigger with a rope mechanism he had constructed. Although the distance was a mere 3 meters, Mr. Wahl remained untouched by the bullets and simply had to deal with the extraordinary fear the experiment induced in him. A 5.56 millimeter bullet, also called a .556, fired from the barrel had the same force as on land, but as in all previous experiments, its momentum quickly disappeared when it entered the water. The tremendous energy of this powerful round only allowed the bullet to penetrate about 5 feet or 1.5 meters into the water. This previously frightening and deadly lump of metal slowed to a stop and gently sank to the bottom of the pool. To be honest, people of course realized that firearms were fairly ineffective in water long before Andreas Wahl's experiment. A bullet with a rounded head has too large of a surface area to fly for long through a substance that is about 784 times denser than air. So, for a projectile's energy to combat dissipation in water, it was realized that something spear-shaped would be required. That's when some people came up with the idea of using a harpoon. However, the deeper you go underwater, the higher a fluid's pressure, and due to this, the accuracy of a shot decreases, and so success with an aimed shot is pretty difficult to achieve. Still, gradually, as designs became more sophisticated, devices that could kill underwater appeared. At the very beginning of the Cold War, something called the Mk1 underwater defense gun was developed in the United States. This weapon's casing was made of light metal alloys. This special weapon used a long bullet with a caliber of 2.54 millimeters. Despite its bulkiness and somewhat inconvenient sights, it was an exceptionally innovative weapon for its time. At a depth of 60 feet or 18 meters, the Mk1 was almost guaranteed to make a kill shot at a distance of up to 33 feet or 10 meters. That's amazingly effective for this depth and distance compared to standard projectiles. But even this over time was surpassed by a more advanced model underwater shooter from another continent. In the 1970s, German company Heckler & Koch developed the P-11 pistol. This miniature weapon has an unusual design, weighs only 2.6 pounds or 1.2 kilograms, and shoots innovative needle-like 7.62 millimeter steel darts electrically out of each of its 5 barrels. The gun is loaded with a 5-round case, which essentially is a replaceable cartridge. After 5 shots, you reload the weapon with a new one. After pulling the trigger, an electric igniter is set off from an internally housed battery, which transfers an enormous amount of energy to the projectile. At a depth of an astounding 100 feet or 30 meters, it can hit a target at a distance of up to 50 feet or 15 meters. And, as always, the finicky Germans thought of everything. A saboteur armed with a P-11 can still be dangerous even on land, firing these steel darts with surefire accuracy at a distance of up to 50 feet or 30 meters. Modern versions of this pistol are in operational service today in many European countries, but public information regarding them is scant. It isn't surprising that they're able to keep so much secret about this gun. Anyone who's taken a close look at their James Bond-esque supergun isn't about to tell anybody anything they're not supposed to. In the Soviet Union in 1971, around the same time as the P-11 was being introduced, a special underwater pistol called the SPP-1 was developed. Having a standard gun shape, this weapon also electrically fires needle-shaped steel darts, in this case measuring in with a width of 4.5 millimeters, and the length of which are almost equal to the length of the barrel. At a depth of 131 feet or 40 meters, the kill shot range of this Soviet underwater electric-powered pistol is about 20 feet or 6 meters. And at a depth of 16 feet, or about 5 meters underwater, this capable firearm can hit a target up to a remarkable 56 feet or 17 meters away. The SPP-1 is also quite formidable on land, capable of firing a projectile up to 65 feet or 20 meters with deadly accuracy. Interestingly, this Cold War-era invention is far superior to modern models, and with its enlarged trigger and convenient reloading mechanism, turned a diver sporting one of these babies into a serious threat to the entire underwater world. Of course, the inventions didn't stop there. In 1975, a special underwater submachine gun called the APS-5 appeared in service with the Soviet Army. At a depth of 16 feet or 5 meters, this weapon can hit just about anything at a distance of up to 131 feet or 40 meters. It can also pierce a diving suit and even a scuba diving mask with glass as thick as 5 millimeters. It can shoot in both single-shot and burst modes. With such a weapon, you could easily hunt sharks and who knows, maybe even Moby Dick himself. However, it should be noted that on land this weapon can fail at the most ill-opportune moments. It is designed to work in water, and out of the water, the various parts and mechanisms fail that much faster. After around 180 shots, the rifle will simply start falling apart, though Russia did recently improve upon this old Soviet creation. They recently presented something called the ADS assault rifle to the world. Unlike its predecessor, this new weapon can shoot with equal force both on land and underwater. Additionally, the ADS can fire up to an astounding 800 rounds per minute. So if you have decided to hide from the bad guys in the river, you're going to need to make sure they're not carrying any of these submersible weapons that can shoot underwater. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to also click the bell button to be the first one to learn about new videos. And stay with us because the best is yet to come.